My name is Brian Wish. I'm an entrepreneur, CEO, and pathfinder. If I've learned anything in life, it's that self-discovery is a critical part of living intentionally, building meaningful relationships, and achieving the future we see for ourselves. In July of 2021, I sold all my possessions, headed west, and began a quest to live a fuller and more meaningful life. The experience helped me truly understand the power of a single moment. And through my conversations with leaders from all walks of life, I've seen how that one phone call, heartbreak, diagnosis, or lost job can transform the entire course of our lives. In this podcast, I sit down with entrepreneurs, influencers, and experts across industries to talk through the events that changed everything. Together, we'll relive the make or break decisions, hard conversations, periods of despair and hope, chance encounters, and everything that followed. Jim Fielding, a proud Ohio native and graduate of Indiana University, is an author, authentic leader, and queer C-suite executive with over 30 years of experience working with some of the world's most beloved media and retail brands, including The Gap, Disney, Claire's, DreamWorks, and 20th Century Fox. Jim is known for his ability to combine storytelling and product merchandising into unforgettable consumer experiences. As a culture builder and talent spotter, he has recruited and trained global leaders in a variety of disciplines and at all levels. Jim's book, All Pride, No Ego, A Queer's Executive's Journey to Living and Leading Authentically, tells his story and reflects his desire to amplify and celebrate stories like his own to help others in the LGBTQ plus community. Today, Jim spends his time and talents on independent media, entrepreneurship, higher education, and philanthropy. He's a partner at Archer Gray, an independent media company inspiring change through storytelling and innovative brand collaborations. Jim has also been active in philanthropy for over 25 years and is a vocal advocate for LGBTQ plus rights. Jim's life changed forever when he learned to embrace his identity and live authentically. Find out what this shift meant for both his personal and professional life today on The One Away Show. Jim Fielding, welcome to The One Away Show.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, congratulations on your latest book, All Pride, No Ego. It's weird, Jim. When I met you, there's a lot of ego, little pride. It was confusing.
Yeah, it's a total fake book. Totally fake book. Yeah.
Jim, it's been an honor getting to know you. I've loved our conversations.
Yeah, me too.
And think the world of you. So we are going to dive into you today. So for the show, Jim, what is your one away moment?
It probably won't surprise people with this title, but I mean, so the full title is All Pride, No Ego, A Queer Executive's Journey to Living and Leading Authentically. And I think my one away moment, which I love about this show, was really, that period between, I'd say 18 and 26 years old, because I officially came out to my family and came out professionally when I was 26, but struggled, especially in the early part of my career between 22 and 26, with leading essentially a double life and faking my way through, living inauthentically, faking my way through the job, faking my way through personal life, faking it with my family. And I think it took a tremendous mental, physical, and emotional toll on myself, even at a young age. And the way that I felt when I finally embraced my authenticity was like an elephant had risen off my chest. It was just unbelievable the way that I felt.
Yeah. I'm sure that was a life-changing moment for you.
Very much.
It was either in the book or you told me about live when you're in the car with your mom. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I told my mom first. I mean, not to sound like a cliched gay man, but I'm from a very nuclear family. I have one sister. So, mom, dad, boy, girl. And I'm the firstborn. I'm a mama's boy still, and I'm very close to my mom. And I think it's, in a weird way, most of my contemporaries find it easier to tell our mothers first. And, but I was a wimp, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to tell her, I didn't want to be sitting anywhere. I didn't want I for some reason in my mind, I twisted it. I was like, if we're driving 70 miles an hour on a highway and I just kind of blurted out, that's going to be better, which was honestly not that bright because I was having trouble getting it out. I literally physically pushed on my stomach to say, Mom, I'm gay. And we instantly both started crying. And of course, she pulled over and we talked for 20 minutes and hugged. And like many parents said, I knew I was just waiting for you to tell me.
Mm.
And I didn't think it was my place to ask. I knew you had to tell me. And she had done her research. I was really impressed by my mom, Brian, because thank God for like the Phil Donahue show. I'm going back to the 80s for all your listeners and viewers. Oprah and the Phil Donahue show and some books that had come out. She had done her research because she was pretty convinced that I was gay or bisexual. And she had read up on it. And I mean, the story, and then instantly after we said what we had to say, and she told me she loved me and would always love me, which is all a little queer person wants to hear. We instantly were like, what are we going to do about your father? Like that became the conversation then. And I said, please don't tell him. I'm not ready to talk to dad yet. I need to figure out how to do that, like on my own time and in my own way. And she agreed to that. But then went back on her agreement, which is in the book. And so about 2 months later, I came home, and this is the olden days, no cell phones, no pagers, to an answering machine message that was, hey, honey, it's your mom, told your dad, I think you better call him. And for whatever reason, she had decided to tell him. I'm still not 100% sure why. And I literally felt my heart drop to my feet because I was like, it was this combination of fear and vulnerability and a little bit of anger at my mom because she was sharing my story and I didn't want it shared yet with him. And I called and he hung up on me. And that started a year of no communication with my father, which was probably the worst time of my life to be estranged from my father. Yeah, it was not great. But we got through it, and that's a lot of my message in the book. And when I meet with young people, my father is a great example of you can teach old dog new tricks. And, by the end of his life, could have been the president of PFLAG in his local chapter because he completely made a 360 and became my biggest cheerleader and ally by the end.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
180, right? 360.
180, 360, 180. I guess a
180. Yeah.
He turned a lot. A 180. Yeah, that is a 180. Thank you.
It's okay. Just want Jim, you spoke about your father having a really hard time with this, hanging up on you a year long. Why do you think your father had such a hard time embracing, accepting you for who you were?
I mean, I think now, with the benefit of hindsight, at the time, I think I thought it was homophobia. I thought it was his machismo. My dad was an all-state football player, a fireman. My dad was a dude. Like he was stereotypical a dude. Men's clubs, things like that. Loved to hunt, loved to fish. And so at the time, I thought it was homophobia and just hatred, honestly, and mistrust and all those words. Over time, what I came to learn from him was it was really coming from a place of fear, and a fear of two things. Number one, when I came out, it was the height of the AIDS crisis. And so many people, when you said I'm gay, they heard I have AIDS, and I have AIDS means I'm going to die young. And then the second thing was, which it took him a long time to tell me, and it would have been so much better if he could have told me in the first month. I think it was probably 10 years later before he ever told me this, was he was afraid it was going to hurt my career and that I was going to be unhappy and I was going to be bullied and harassed. And so it was actually a protective instinct on his part. What he didn't understand that by withdrawing, I then filled in the narrative thinking he was just so disappointed in me
Mm,
and so not liking me. But in a way, he was processing it because he was trying to protect me. And
mm.
I think once he saw my career growing and saw me getting promoted and saw me being happy, I think those fears subsided.
Yeah.
And I think he was able to come around and learn and kind of listen without judgment.
Yeah, that's awesome that he was able to turn, right? Because that weight on your shoulders when you're estranged from someone you love, or your family, is not a healthy weight to
Mm-mm,
carry,
mm-mm.
uh, especially when it comes down to who you are at your core. Um, Jim,
Yes.
can I ask one more question on
Sure.
so
Sure.
you talked about how this was about your father protecting you, right, and wanting you to like not be hurt and this and that. At the same time, right, like it's like you do the work. You can't maybe blame your father because of how he grew up and his own experiences, but how much do you think you telling him that kind of didn't align with his expectations of what he thought of a family, and that was
Totally.
a total impact on
Yeah.
his idea of family?
No, completely. I mean, I think the worst thing for me, I mean, what you're hitting on, Brian, is I thought I was disappointing him and that
Mm,
I wasn't the son. He had one son, he had a firstborn son. And I had honestly spent a lot of my life feeling like I disappointed him. I tried football, I hated it. Like, I knew, and God bless him, he never wanted me to be a firefighter, like, because I wouldn't have been great at that either. And so I give my dad a lot of credit because he didn't force me into a mold, which I do appreciate. And so as I became a swimmer and a tennis player and was doing choir and acting, my dad was super supportive of that, even though that was nothing that he would have done. But I think he was wrestling with the fact that his definition of success was a good job with good benefits, a good pension, a good wife, two kids, a dog, and a house in Toledo, Ohio with a white picket fence. I mean, that was his definition of success. I think he realized by the time I was in my early double digits, early teens, that my life and my path was going to be outside of Toledo. And that he did switch. And this had nothing to do with being gay, straight, or whatever. I do feel, and my sister and I have talked a lot about this because she felt it too, that they gave us wings and actually encouraged us to think bigger than Toledo,
mm,
that our path was not going to be. My mom and dad were third generation Toledoans. I don't think they ever really thought about their life bigger than Toledo, but they gave both of us the opportunity to think about the rest of the world, the rest of the United States. I mean, I studied overseas, went on an overseas studies trip for 3 weeks when I was 16 in Germany.
wow.
That was a lot of money for us. And he made it happen because he was exposing me. Like my dad died never having gone to Europe. I went to Europe 3 times before I left high school and then studied in Europe during college. So it's like the fact that he was able to enable that in me, something that he never got to do himself, um, tells you a lot about my dad.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's cool that you can see him for those qualities.
Yeah, I really
That wasn't
appreciate it.
a sever of the family. Like there was a turn, right? Because
Yeah, it was, yeah, well, for a year it was not fun,
right.
but once we I mean, for a year to talk to my mother, I had to call my sister, who would then call my mother, and then my mother would call me, because if I called and he picked up, uh, you know, he would hang up. And I caused issues in my mom and dad's relationship, which I hated
Yeah.
because he was making her almost choose sides. And she was going to protect me, even if it meant her own marriage might suffer a little bit.
Hmm. Brownie points to mom for
For
sure.
sure.
Yeah, gotta have a good mom.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about up until you were 26, leading a double life.
Yeah.
Make that tangible for us. What did that?
I was dating men and women. So I was calling myself bisexual, even though I really knew that I was homosexual. I was at work not sharing my personal life, or if I did talk about my personal life, like what I did on the weekend, I was very careful about pronouns. And, if I had between 22 and 26, I had a partner. I was living with somebody, and the poor guy was a she all the time. Like she, her. I never said he, him. I never used his name. He never came to a work event or like a Christmas party or a Halloween function. Yeah, most people didn't even know I was in a relationship. And I had this small cadre of friends that knew the truth, but they were sworn to secrecy. I just was so conscious of this double narrative. When I say I was living a double life, I was doing a double narrative. Now, at 22, 23, I stopped dating women. So I cut that narrative off. But then when I got in the relationship with this gentleman, um, I was not acknowledging it openly and was actually lying, changing the narrative, or just choosing not to change the narrative or just not to share the narrative. I mean, like if people ask me what I do on the weekend, I'd be like, oh, nothing. Right. Oh, I went and saw a movie with friends. Like I was super conscious of not oversharing.
So thanks for sharing all that,
Sure.
with us. Was it more of a cultural thing you didn't want to, it was the times it wasn't as accepted, or what was it? So, and if not, or maybe part of it, what
Mm-hmm.
were you grappling with? It sounds like, because your dad and mom didn't find out until later, but you had built
Right.
a community of people, and
Mm-hmm.
why were you so scared to share with those individuals?
I was buying into the same fears and vulnerabilities as everybody else. Like I thought I was going to be marginalized. I thought I was going to be discriminated against. There's a chapter in the book, the third learning in the book about it's called "Don't Let Anyone Dim Your Light," but it's a lot about bullying I experienced at various parts of my life, and I talk about in the book that everything people were saying to me or calling me was not as bad as what I was saying to myself internally. It was honestly my inner voice and my inner saboteur. I thought, honestly, Brian, I thought I was broken. I thought I was wrong. I thought I needed to change. I wasn't embracing that this was my authenticity and that this was my story. And so I needed to work through that even as a gay man before being able to handle it with the rest of the world. Because again, anything I said or thought about myself was 10 times worse than what anybody was saying about me from the outside. As I got stronger and more confident and more understanding that this was the path I was meant to be on, that narrative again changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could say, I am out, I am proud, this is who I am, and I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. That gave me a new level of confidence to then address the bullying, address the homophobia, address the marginalization. Before I was almost buying into it, almost like I deserved it. And I know that sounds horrible, but many people in my generation would share a similar story because we were taught our entire lives that we were wrong. It wasn't just that we were different, it was that we were wrong. And there was people that thought we were making a choice, that this was not our nature, that I was choosing to be gay. It was just a really difficult process.
It's must have felt, it's like hiding yourself, like you
Totally.
not even be able to show up, and I really want to address some things around this journey.
Yeah.
But I also want to dig into this a little bit more. Totally makes sense why you felt like you couldn't share. Absolutely. I'm curious, when you looked at yourself in the mirror, right, prior to coming out, how would you describe your self concept, or how you saw value in yourself then?
It was weird. I could always compartmentalize. Like I would look at myself in the mirror and say, you're smart. You're talented. Like I was learning things quickly in the industry. I was getting promoted. I was getting rewarded and recognized. I had a lot of friends. I was, quote, popular, right? So there was a lot of positive self talk in it. And I would just compartmentalize the fact that my truest story, my most authentic core story, I just was not ready to share, or the world wasn't ready to hear yet. Like I would sometimes blame the world a little bit, right? Or blame the community and say, well, they're just not ready to hear that yet. So I'm going to just, it was like layers of an onion, Brian, right? Like I would peel back some of the layers, but the closer I would get to the core, I would leave those layers, wrapped around the core.
Mm.
But it was a very conscious, continuous inner dialogue. Like the self-talk was there all the time.
Yeah, interesting. I would have expected maybe a different answer.
Really?
Yeah, but learning, you said you compartmentalize, like, you saw the good things about yourself. But like I think you said it well, like there was some gray. You just weren't ready, right, to reveal the two layers closest to the core. But everyone else could embrace the other positive things about
Yeah,
you.
and I was getting external validation and positive feedback for the parts I was exposing, right? So I was feeding off of that energy. And I wrote a paper recently because I really don't love the term coming out, and we talk about that all the time. And I like the term more inviting in, like me inviting you in. We talked about this, me inviting you into my story, you inviting me into your story, right? And I wasn't ready to invite people into my story. And when I went for it. Because once you do that, once you do open that closet door, as we say, once you invite those first 2 or 3 people in, then it becomes like wildfire, because you can't control it, because they're going to bump into somebody and they're going to say something. And, you can't it just spreads. And this is before even social media. I think it spreads faster now than, even in the olden days when I did it. So once you crack that door open and take those first steps and start inviting people into your story, you have to be prepared that the pace is going to pick up. And there's really no going back and saying, oh, gotcha, kidding, right? Like, was kidding, meet my girlfriend, Marilyn. Like, once you do it, there's no like going back. So I needed to be really, really ready, like very methodical. And I knew there was no turning back once I made that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's almost as if you rip the, again, like
Band-Aid.
if you once you rip the Band-Aid, there's no going back.
No,
But
sorry.
I also love the analogy of it picks up momentum, right? It's interesting, right? It's like the full momentum of your life couldn't be built when you weren't showing all the layers.
I was holding myself back. And if you look at like when you talk about tangibility, I love that word. When you look at my career progression after I came out, I completely attribute to the fact that I was marrying my skills and my talents and my innate abilities and my authenticity, because I didn't have to think anymore about changing pronouns and changing the narrative. I just was me. And I think the companies that worked with me and the positions that I was in were getting the best of me at that point. And really, when I look at the progression in my career and the companies that I worked for after that, that's really what a huge message is in my book, is about allowing everybody to embrace their authenticity, not just queer people. Everybody has authenticity. Everybody has differences and quirks and things that make them unique. My leadership philosophy, my authentic leadership philosophy is, if you create work environments, safe work environments where people are trusted and motivated and empowered and feel safe to share their stories and their authenticity, they'll perform better. 100%. Like, I know I've seen it with myself and I've seen it with teams that I've built.
That's totally, Jim. And I love what you said about how your career progression took off after you started embracing yourself fully. Let's maybe make this a more universal question, right?
Sure.
Talk about, pick your favorite company. If it's Disney, great. But what's your pick of company that you embrace?
A company I worked for.
No, it doesn't have to be. I'm just like a company you could have worked for, a company you worked for. Like,
Yeah. No, I think the Gap was a huge part, because that's part of why I went to the Gap. So let's talk about the Gap.
Let's talk about the Gap. All right. Interesting. The Gap. It's kind of a meta in this conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. The Gap.
What percentage of the workforce, if you had to guess, percentage of the workforce would you guess at the Gap is not maybe authentically living or embracing their full individuality?
At the time I was there, I would say, luckily for Gap, it was in the single digits. I definitely knew people that were not fully embracing themselves. But I think Gap, because it was based in San Francisco, because it was in the retail industry, I would say more people were embracing their authenticity than not. I think, being in the fashion industry, the retail industry, but there were definitely people I knew that were not living their full authenticity.
All right, so let's say Gap's an anomaly. Let's say
Yep.
Gap low single digits. Let's take
Yeah.
okay. Let's do something on the polar opposite, just for this.
Banking.
Let's take oh, great. All right.
Pro sports. Let's
Okay,
take
great.
another industry.
Okay, yeah. That's an interesting industry. Let's go with banking though, not to piss off any of my sports friends.
Yeah.
Let's just take Chase.
JP Morgan Chase. I think it's probably in the double digits.
Okay.
I think definitely, especially based on function, like investment banking function or, the traders for sure.
So okay, awesome, right? I totally would have expected that around that, right? Double
Yep.
digit, maybe 40%.
Could be.
Why do you think it's so hard? I think obviously this problem is so true for you and you experience this so viscerally at a familial level, a personal level, and on a very acute topic that is true to you are. But there's a world out there, right, where I think tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people have not been able to start to fully embrace themselves. Why do you think that is?
I think because the systems, and I'm totally aware of who I'm speaking to, so no harm intended. No harm intended. No harm intended. The systems were set up to advantage the patriarchy, particularly the straight white patriarchy. And so I think that the trials and tribulations of the queer community, of the Black community, the Latinx community, the AAPI community, women, any marginalized community that is not part of the patriarchy has felt a lot of the same emotions that I felt over the years, because you're bucking systems that have been in place in some cases since the founding of the country, before the founding of the country, since the Constitution and the founding fathers, as we call them. And the people that control those systems work really, really hard to protect those systems and don't necessarily want to fully embrace change and want to diversify the way that the world is diversifying right now. And they're actually threatened by the change. So I think when you talk about an industry like banking, which is, again, one of the founding father banking industries, right? The families of, you mentioned Chase, it's JP Morgan Chase. That's the Morgan family, right? You can go back and study that history. The systems and the people who led the bank and the people who were the bosses were part of the patriarchy. And anything different than the patriarchy was threatening to them. And I think that's why you see a lot of the things that you see, not only in my community, but the number of female CEOs, the number of queer CEOs, the number of Black CEOs, like the numbers in the C-suite don't match the total population if you just take total percentages, right? Why? Because the boardrooms and the C-suites are still controlled by the founding fathers.
It's interesting. It's these power structures and systems that keep perpetuating what was to hold
100%. And that's why, I think part of the reason that I've so enjoyed getting to know you, Brian, is you represent a generation, like your generation and the generation of my nieces and the people I spend time with on college campuses. You know what I just talked about. You guys are so aware of it, but what you do is you're like, I'm going to go out and build my own company. I'm going to go out and build my own consulting business. I'm going to go out. I'm going to challenge the system, challenge the status quo by not buying into the status quo. That gives me, as an old queer man, a lot of hope when I see people like you and your contemporaries who want to make change and want to make systemic change, because that's what I'm talking about, is systemic change. And I feel like we need it. We need it in the world. I think all of the conflicts we have going on around the world, the war in Ukraine, all of that, it's the patriarchy fighting against the patriarchy, trying to protect something that doesn't even exist anymore. And I'm not saying if Russia was run by a woman, it wouldn't have happened, but I kind of am saying that.
On this note that you're speaking to in this tangent, and we're promised we're gonna get
Yeah,
back
yeah. No, that's fine.
to
That's
Jim's
fine.
story, but I also think
No, I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
there's like a philosophy within this for you. I think there's something
Yeah.
there. So, and like, me, just quick tangent, like I just felt so deeply like that norm wasn't for me, and like I didn't know it's
Yeah.
scary as hell, right? And I think it is scary to step outside the ranks, but my so for, let's just say, the tens of millions of people who are 18 to 28, right? Uh, in this country,
Mm-hmm.
or 18 to 35, who still have, I think, a lot of time to make some drastic shifts in their life to do the things they want. What, from your perspective, right, and your own narrative of what you went through to embrace your own individuality and authentic self, what's this process? What's the steps, right, to eventually realize kind of what you represent,
Yep.
identify the people that help you kind of mold and to kind of get to that over the bridge, and then like fully step into it, right?
Yeah. It is a process. Like I think that's a great word because it's not a light switch. It's not like one day I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm going to fully embrace my authenticity. And from this day forward, everything's going to change. And so, what I would say to people in that 18 to 35, anybody in that phrase who's like going through this period of their life and discovery, and not even just their sexuality, just discovering what kind of job they like and what kind of business they were, what kind of profession they want, where do they want to live in the country or in the world. It's a lot of stuff I write in the book is like build your network, build relationships. I mean, build relationships, find your chosen family, your found family. We have your natural family. I write a lot about finding your chosen family, the people that your posse that you're going to go through life with, your truth tellers who you can bounce ideas off of. I talk about being constantly curious and a lifelong learner. And so I say to people, wherever you live, go out and sample the community that you live in. Go to art museums, go to music shows, don't just go to the things that like push yourself to go to different kinds of restaurants. Like don't always go to the same restaurant over and over again because you like it. Try different types of restaurants, try different cuisines, go to street fairs, go to street festivals, live and drink it in. And all of those experiences start to help you form, what you like and what you don't like, what you're passionate about and what you're not passionate about. And sometimes you don't know until you actually try something, right? And even just using food, for example, there's so many people that are like, I don't like seafood or I don't like sushi or I don't like, and I'm like, when was the last time you tried it? Like I literally will ask people, right? Is this left over from when you were 16 and ate a spicy tuna roll from the first time and now you're 30? Have you tried it again? Because guess what? Tastes change. Your taste buds change, like your palate changes. So I feel like this curiosity and this learning, it's like this is a great big world, and it doesn't matter the size of the community you live in. There are things that are going on all over the place, and if you put yourself out there and try some stuff, I think it's going to help you form your authenticity, your identity, and surround yourself to back to this chosen family or network or friend group, whatever you want to call it. Surround yourself with truth tellers and people that you trust and who love you unconditionally and will support you unconditionally so that you can ask them for feedback. What do you guys think? I'm thinking about trying this. What do you guys think? Do you think, I mean, value other people's opinions. You're not in this alone.
Hmm.
And I think it's not, there is a certain amount of inner talk and there's a solitary, to this journey. There's a lot of you can be doing yoga and meditation and journaling. There's a lot of things like that. But to me, I found wisdom in the group, right? In my network.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the root of, two things, right? It's the root of creating a culture of experimentation. But it's around creating this culture of experimentation, and then like this acceptance to like experiment and getting people comfortable in that operating state.
Yeah, completely.
Jim, I'm curious. So I want to go back to the car moment with your mom, and
Yeah.
it was you, I think, getting to the core of that, onion, the, core,
Yeah.
the one or two layers left off. He said, "This is here who I am." You walked across that bridge to start embracing yourself. I want to
Yeah.
talk about, and you alluded to it. Your career started taking off. How did your life start to take form as you said, "This is Jim Fielding. This is who I am fully." What changed for you?
Oh my God. I mean, so much stuff. I mean, fully embracing the person I was dating at the time, my partner at the time, and you know, going through life as a couple, like, spending time with his family, spending time with the part of my family that was accepting me, which did for the first year did not include my father. That person and my sister got very, very close. Um, like introducing him to my circle of friends, right? As my partner, as someone that I wanted to be part of our community. It was almost like bringing him into the community. Um, we started to travel more, internationally, nationally. We just started to like move through life, experiencing life together. Um, my career at the Gap progressed really, really well. Like I was starting to do a lot of really interesting moves and learning and growing all the time, living in San Francisco. I think a lot of my volunteer work and giving back to the community started in earnest at that point. Working on the AIDS quilt, working with God's Love We Deliver, the food delivery service, just becoming more active and aware in the gay community about, I think the gay activism in me started to come out at
Hmm.
that time. Meeting other people who were like me, right? After feeling that I was an odd duck and broken, and I was the only one in the world who felt like this, you started to meet hundreds of people who had a very similar experience to you. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel as lonely. It doesn't feel as isolating. And you realize that, like, oh my gosh, I wish I would. I think it's almost like I don't really live with regrets. I talk about in the book that I try not to live with regrets, but it's almost like you live with regrets because I'm like, God, what did I miss out
Hmm.
on those 10 years where I was just constantly angsty, right? Where I was so afraid of my own shadow, my own truth. What did I miss out on? Right. And this is going to sound so weird, but I know I can say this to you, Brian, and apologize to people. It was almost like going through puberty in a way again, right? It was like this adolescence. Like it was, I was a 26-year-old who was doing a lot of the things that he probably should have done when he was 15 and 16. I'm not talking about sexually. I'm just talking about like discovery, right? Um and curiosity. Like it wasn't even a renaissance because I wasn't reborn. It was like I was born for the first time, right? Like it was those layers of the onion just started opening, and I was just at the core and loving every minute of it. Everything felt fresh.
So, I mean, I really resonate with what you just shared,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, and it's neat that it's like you had this new skin or
Yeah.
this new operating
A
system,
new
and
opera. It's like I rebooted. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. I had a new iOS. I got the newest version.
you liked it a lot more, and and
Yeah.
and I think that's what's so interesting about, like, your work and, like, your own journey, and why it's not just about coming out or inviting people in, right? It's about giving the gift of a new operating system, right? To could
Yeah.
be millions of people, because I think so many people are scared to
Yeah.
bring a new operating system into their life because of like what that change is going to bring.
Hmm. No, it's like it's Jim unplugged, right? It's like Jim, like it's the living the full JD Fielding experience, like, and taking the good and the bad and the funny and the sad and all of the emotions of the rainbow. But like it felt freeing. I mean, it just felt very freeing.
I'm trying to figure out why we connect so well, Jim.
Yeah,
So I mean, we can talk about the career and all the things. Let's maybe loop back to that in a bit.
sure.
You've recent So first off, I want to like applaud on this journey of life, and I think you describe it so in a way that hits right in a very universal way, but clearly like for your community, like a big inspiration. What is, you decided to come out with this book, All Pride, No Ego.
Yes.
Why now?
Yeah, it felt, listen, I'm in my late 50s. I see 60 in the windshield. I'm not trying to make time go faster, but I'd felt I started to hear more and more from people that they thought that I had a unique story to share. And I mean, people that I respected, people that knew me, but then I actually started to hear it from people in the publishing industry and magazine writers and things like that. A lot of it was what I was posting on LinkedIn. And I kept saying when people would contact me, I'm like, oh, I don't want to write a book. I don't want to write a book. No one wants to read my story. And finally, and it happens to be an editor at John Wiley, where my book is published, where I ended up making my book deal with. She said, I think you should write the book. At the time I was 56, that 56-year-old Jim writes to that 26-year-old Jim who was struggling with his truth.
Mm.
And she gave me the permission to basically write a very selfish, cathartic book that almost was writing a book to myself, like things that I wished I'd known when I was 24, 25, 26, that I knew, like with age comes wisdom. It's not an autobiography. I know you've read a lot of it, Brian, but it's autobiographical in nature. And I share personal and professional stories. It's not told chronologically. So it's not, it's not a true autobiography. But that kind of structure helped me write the book and realize that I did have a story I wanted to share, and that if I could make life easier for young Jim, or people like young Jim around the world and in the United States to embrace their authenticity faster and move through life with less angst and less self-loathing and less despair, I felt that I could be making a small change in the world. Little ripples.
Yeah, no, not big ripples. Come on. No, it's neat that your perspective of, hey, how do I write the letter to my younger self?
Yeah.
That letter is.
Well, and because, not to get all emotional, but if I hadn't done the book, you and I, we wouldn't be doing this discussion. Like I would have never met you. And now the number of conversations we've had, I can't imagine not knowing you. And I can't imagine not watching your path and what you're going to do in the world personally and professionally now that I know more about you and what your goals are. And if I hadn't written the book, you and I would have never I doubt we would have ever found each other. Right. And so I'm such a firm believer in fate and the higher power and spirituality that, like, you and I were meant, like, right now, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Right now, we are supposed to be doing this discussion, and you and I are supposed to be connecting like this, and the other ways that we've connected outside of this. And I know that by knowing you, no matter how long I know, my life will be better because I connected with you and you've taught me things already. And that is where the book is a gift to me. As I'm out on this book tour, as I'm meeting with people at events and bookstores, and people share their stories with me, that is why I wrote the book. It's been unbelievable.
Well, first, thanks for the kind words. It's
sure.
Takes a special person to recognize things in somebody else. So that's your credit here. I'm glad the book has been.
Yeah,
it's very early in the journey.
It's early, but it's felt good so far.
You have a marathon in front of you, and I know you're going to impact a lot of lives.
Thank you.
As you're looking, Jim, at this next decade, right? By the way, for those listening, Jim says he's late 50s, doesn't look a year over 51. So
thank you, Brian.
You bet. So, Jim, you wrote this book. You said 60s in the rear view. Not trying to age faster, but you're at this interesting intersection of life where
for sure
you can, like, I think, have just such a significant impact on people. What do you see over the next 10 years, right? In terms of where you want to be, and what does that look like,
Yeah, I love that. I think what I realized about 6 months ago, before the book was coming out, as I was getting the final proofs and the final galleys, and I started to get some early reader comments, and I saw the cover for the first time. It started to dawn on me that it was more than just a book, that it was a discussion starter, it was a community builder, and it was a discussion and a philosophy that I wanted to go out in the world and keep spending time with people and sharing. And that I really wanted to devote my energy to helping create a world more about authenticity, and particularly about authentic leadership. And so as I look out over the next 10 years, I want to make sure I'm spending, a good majority of my time on this type of work, on, spending time with people like you, on traveling to universities and, civic groups and corporations, and just sharing my philosophy, but at the same time, listening and learning from every one of those interchanges and every one of those exchanges. Like, I want to still be a sponge. I want to still be constantly curious and a lifelong learner. Any engagement I enter, or speaking role or consulting role I do, I want it to be mutually beneficial, where I'm adding value to whatever that situation is. And at the same time, I'm taking value out of it, meaning I'm better. And so I think that's a really kind of new metric for me is, am I getting back, not necessarily equal. It doesn't have to be I'm giving X and I'm getting Y back. Like, it doesn't have to be like I'm giving 50%, I'm getting 50%. It's just, am I learning? Am I growing from this engagement, this time? And I'm really focusing hard, Brian, on just being super present and not doing all the planning my next 10 days in my head when I'm in a meeting. Like, I'm trying to be very, very present doing what I'm doing, focusing on you, focusing on this right now, not worrying about the 3 appointments I have after this.
You're so popular. You're like, Brian, it's just one of the little things I got today.
Brian's a to-do. Just let me get through this. Just get through this to-do. No, that's
check that box.
That's exactly what I don't want to be. Like, I told you before we started how excited I was. There's things on your calendar that you look at and you're like, oh, I can't wait for that one. This was one of those.
Good. I'm glad this was a bright spot for you.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was.
You put yourself in a position, right, to be able to learn, to grow, and growing your own full individuality in this next chapter. You've had, it sounds like, an incredible career. I know we haven't touched on Jim's genius in his career, but that's on the other episodes. That's where you're popular.
That's a whole nother,
So, Jim, we have a couple minutes left here.
Sure.
Is there anything I did not touch on? Is there anything you want to shed light on before we close out?
Wow, no, I think you really took me to some interesting places. No, I really just encourage everyone listening to this, everybody watching this, to embrace your authenticity, embrace your story, embrace your truth, whatever that truth is. And even though it might be painful getting there, I can 100% guarantee you that coming out the other side of that embracing moment, your life is going to change in exponential ways.
Amazing. Well, Jim, I love doing this with you. I can't wait to meet you in person whenever the time comes.
I know. Me too.
And I'm excited for you and the lives that you're going to change. So
thanks so much. No, I really appreciate it, Brian. Really, really, very so much.
Thank you for joining me on the One Away Show. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please leave a review and follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a one away moment you'd like to share? Follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BrianWish_, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me about the moment that altered your life. The One Away Show is produced by Arcbound, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, experts, and visionaries launch authentic personal brands. From message development to podcast production, social media content generation, and book writing, we work with you to create your arc. Head to arcbound.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and please join me next time on The One Away Show.